right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, it is a long time coming. A regular of this podcast, Chad Clinton Freeman, has been wanting to come on this podcast to talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for a long time. We have a series, a special side series that we call Breaking It Apart, where we take our whole format, which, by the way, if you're new to the show, welcome. I'm very happy to have you here. But our format of looking at a movie through the lens of what other movies might have inspired it, we take that format and do it backwards, and we look at an older movie and figure out what movies it inspired. And Chad's been wanting to do the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for so long that we actually waited all the way until a whole new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie is out. It's out now on Netflix. It's the 9th in the series. And so we are doing a combined episode, which is actually the second time we've done this on the podcast, because back in 2018, we did the same thing with Halloween. We did Breaking It Apart on the original Halloween and then regular Piecing It Together on the new Halloween. Now we're doing that with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Can't picture two more perfect series to do this kind of an episode with, to be honest with you, but we'll get into that some more during the episode. Lots of great puzzle pieces coming up. Before we get to the conversation, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us over on Pocket Casts. Why'd I go with Pocket Casts first? That's what I listen to podcasts with, but usually I say Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Pocket Cast is number 3, or Good Pods, or over on Podchaser, you can listen as well. Any of the places you listen to podcasts, make sure you're subscribed. You can rate and review us if you like what we do here on the show. And by the way, lots of great, really nice reviews lately, so thank you so much to everyone who's out there doing that. We're also back in the top 10 at Good Pods, so thank you for listening on Good Pods. We really appreciate it. While you're at it, follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where Chad terrorizes us while we try to have nice movie conversations. And we also have a Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I combine bonus content for Piecing It Together, Awesome Movie Year, which is another movie podcast that I produce, and from my music career. Lots of great content over there and a bunch of stuff getting ready to post over there very soon. I actually just posted a new song over there, something that's going to be on my next album. So, all kinds of bonus and advanced content. So check it out. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. I'll actually be posting the Uncharted episode on there in the next couple of days, which won't hit the main feed for a while. And currently, our episode on the new Scream is on there, which will go up as soon as the film hits VOD in March. But you can get it early on the Patreon. So, with all that said, let's talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. All right, the Leatherface of our podcast is back with us today. It's Chad Clinton Freeman. Chad, how's it going?
It's going good. I just want to say right off the bat, because I haven't been on here for, I think it's like 6 months or so. Last year, I've heard a lot of people talk, bad about the movies that came out. Last year was a great year for movies. That was totally my opinion. I think there was a lot of fantastic stuff that was released. And I just wanted to put that on the record right off the bat, because I know I've heard a couple of people just kind of been like, yeah. I'm mostly talking about Jason, but still.
Yeah, sure. And as I've said, like, the first half of last year was pretty grim, but I think it came back around, and every year is an awesome movie year, and there was plenty of great movies last year for sure. And one thing that we have been talking about doing on this podcast for a long time, last year we talked about it, the year before we talked about it, is doing a Texas Chainsaw Massacre Breaking It Apart episode. Never got around to it, and as does happen in Hollywood, everything gets rebooted or requeled or legacy sequeled or just regular old sequeled or prequeled, and here we are. We've got a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and for everyone listening at home, what we're going to do today is kind of mash the two ideas together of a brand new episode on the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre and a Breaking It Apart on the original 1974, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We've lost the in the years since. And put it all together. And we did this a few years back for Halloween as well, when the 2018 Halloween reboot came out. Chad, you've always been on board to do Texas Chainsaw Massacre on the show. Tell us a little bit about why you love the original so much.
Oh yes, so that was one of the movies I wanted to do as soon as you started doing this, breaking it apart. We got to do Texas Chainsaw Massacre, of course. Blair Witch Project was the other one I'd mentioned, and
Sure.
I'm sure there'll be another Blair Witch here soon enough.
Yes.
But no, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is, to me, it's just so special, and it's not just me. I know it's beyond that, because you've got this movie that it was really a small indie that became like this huge phenomenon. What makes it great to me, though, is how there are so many different ways that you can view this film. You can see it as, a traditional horror movie, just about some kids on this road trip, and then they come across evil. And that sets up so many horror movies since.
Sure.
It kind of was the template for that, which it kind of stole from Scooby-Doo in a sense. But there's so much more to it than that, though. And honestly, so many people come away with this movie feeling like the killers are, the people to root for. Because in a way, it's a revenge film. And there's just so many different layers, because the first time I saw it, I was just like, wow, this is like the most bizarre thing I've ever seen.
Sure.
It really took like underground and grindhouse type stuff and then pulled that into mainstream horror, and it did it in this unique way that just felt really real. And it's just so raw. But because of that, also in the marketing of it, people actually thought it was real for so many years.
Right.
Especially, nowadays, kids probably don't believe this, but at one point, you couldn't just Google stuff and look on Wikipedia, information.
Sure.
People would say stuff, and that became the, oh, I guess that was the case. So for a long time, a lot of people did think that this was like based on reality.
Yeah.
And I think that helped in many ways set up found footage. I mean, there's a lot of, this is really a precursor of a lot of things in many ways, including found footage, including torture porn, slasher movies. This was the very first slasher. I mean, Psycho was beforehand, but this one really set up the whole final girl aspect.
Sure. Yeah.
There's just so many things about this movie that make it really, really special. And you watch it today and it still holds up. It's still got that bizarre effect to it. It's still like, wow, what is going on? It's one of those movies that reminds me of why I love movies and why I watch so many movies. It's like my first experience when I saw Pulp Fiction. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Pulp Fiction are two of those movies that why I'm watching them, just like, what is going on? And it just like gave me this rush of, yes, this is why I love movies.
Absolutely, yeah. And I would just add to that, because I agree with everything you're saying there, and just to you, and like thinking back to your Pollygrind Film Festival, the idea of filmmakers making so much impact with so little resources and so little like to actually work with. This original really felt like they were just putting together things that they could manage to put together, and really, really getting the most bang for their buck with every single little aspect of production design and set design and gore and everything, and really making the story come to life because of how much just amazing talent was behind the scene, even if they didn't have the big Hollywood budgets behind them.
Yeah, definitely. Very much about passion
Yeah.
and love and creativity that brought it all together. And yeah, no, definitely lots of behind the scenes talent. Obviously, that the set designs, the the every like aspect of the props and such. I mean, I still feel that this is the best Leatherface mask. You've got so much advancements in technology and makeup and things like that, but still, to me,
Yeah.
this is the best looking, most realistic feeling Leatherface mask that's ever been on screen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're going to do Breaking It Apart style on the 1974 Tobe Hooper original now. And obviously, we could list just like you mentioned, every slasher. Like we could talk about so many
Right.
movies along the way, but we'll keep it reined in a little bit for the sake of time, and also because we're going to be also talking about the new Texas Chainsaw in a minute. But let's start off with just a handful of some movies that the original inspired. What do you got for your first piece here?
Well, I'm going to go with a movie I actually have already mentioned, but go into more detail. Another movie I love, and that's the Blair Witch Project.
Hmm.
Because, with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's got this opening crawl that tells you it's a true story. And then you've got it shot in this, like, lots of the moments in the film are very uh, documentary style of the cameras like in the weeds and the grass and in the trees, and what you're seeing just kind of unfolds in front of you, not heavy with the cuts until it's needed.
Hmm.
And cinema verte style.
Sure.
That plus the marketing, which once this came out, that was the word of mouth that really got people amped up about it. Of, oh, this is a true story. Oh, you've got to see this. Um, all of that was, I think, a huge influence on what the Blair Witch Project did in regards to its marketing. And not only that, it's uh, also Blair Witch is a movie about this group of kids. It starts off very kind of fun and lighthearted, and they end up getting in over their heads. They're more in the woods than they are in Chainsaw, but still, you've got that element.
Sure.
You've got also the weird, like in Chainsaw, it's the cans in the tree, and then also like the bone windmills and things like that. And then Blair Witch, you've got the stick men that are hanging from the trees and such.
Yeah.
You've also got this creepy old house. So there's definitely some elements that not only from the marketing standpoint, but also in the film itself. Plus the fact that you don't see as much as you feel and as much as you take away from actually, once you've seen it, you a lot of people say they saw things that they didn't actually see,
Sure.
so then that helps also with that whole word of mouth thing. But not only that, it's just that a lot with the Blair Witch, people give credit to Cannibal Holocaust, which of course was a film that came after Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So
Sure.
we could say that Cannibal Holocaust was inspired by this one, and then that was part of that inspiration for Blair Witch, because Cannibal Holocaust people really say is like the grandfather of found footage, but it's only about found footage within the film itself, and it's one of those that was supposed to be real. And before internet, of course, everything was real if people said it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, Blair Witch definitely belongs in this, and that whole feeling of like, is this real? Was this based on something that actually happened? And the way that they were able to really drive that home and make it like just seem as real as can be, definitely is exactly what the Blair Witch was trying to go for all those years later. And yeah, Cannibal Holocaust, kind of the connective tissue between the two, I guess, in a way.
And
Um,
Scooby Doo also.
of course, of course. Well, what hasn't Scooby Doo
That's true.
inspired?
That's
Yeah.
true.
Speaking of things that what hasn't it inspired, I'm going to go for my first piece with something I may have brought up before here on the show, but I think it was definitely inspired by
I
Tobe
may have a
Hooper.
guess.
It's a little movie called The Evil Dead from Sam Raimi. But 1981, it came 7 years later, and I mean, I think Sam Raimi is pretty much on record as saying how much he loves Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And again, like I was talking about earlier with that whole trying to make the most you can with very little resources. I mean, these are people who just approached it with very little money, but a lot of love for the craft and for just making the coolest, most interesting thing they could possibly put together, and using that to come up with the craziest gore effects and the coolest creatures and just everything from Tom Sullivan's makeup and Sam Raimi's direction and cool creative camera stuff and just everything that went into making The Evil Dead is, I think, kind of steeped in the tradition of what Tobe Hooper was doing with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And then on another level, you could say a few years later, going to the sequel, The Evil Dead 2, which is kind of a self-parody sequel that is right there, going back to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, with Tobe Hooper basically kind of self-parodying himself with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, definitely. No, Evil Dead on my list for sure. Where I actually had that also is one of the big things that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre did for cinema was really, I guess, I was going to say kick down the door, but no, it sliced open the door with a chainsaw.
Yeah, sounds about right.
The use of power tools and like household objects
Sure.
that everyday families had in their house, like in their garage, that now could be used as like a murderous weapon, which of course the chainsaw in Evil Dead is a huge piece of it. And yeah, before Chainsaw Massacre, you did have Wes Craven's Last House on the Left,
Mm-hmm.
which had the father use a chainsaw against this, murderous group of people. But I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre was able to, because that movie, although it's a classic, although it's great, it didn't have the mainstream success that
Sure.
Chainsaw Massacre did, and still Last House on the Left is still a very underseen, underrated kind of classic. Whereas if you're into horror at all, I think you've seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, uh, and even if
Hopefully.
you're not, you probably have.
Yeah.
And then also, like you said, with it goes in line with the sequel as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's very much a good piece to have in line here. And I knew you were going to bring it up,
Of
but
course. Yeah.
because I just jotted down, just I doubt you're going to mention any of these others, but Power Tools, one of the big influencers of this film. So I
Yeah,
had Evil
sure.
Dead in there. I had
Yeah.
American Psycho, High Tension, Driller Killer, Scarface, Slumber Party Massacre, Toolbox Murders. There's just so many Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers, but um, lots and lots and lots of movies where power tools are involved, especially
Oh
chainsaws.
yeah, for sure. Especially Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers, a classic. So is that your next piece then? Just movies with power tools?
Actually, what I wanted to go into next, because I've got tons of side pieces here and
I'm
different
sure you have
aspects,
plenty.
but the one I wanted to go to was a movie that actually came out last year. Fantastic movie, one of my favorite movies of 2021, and that's Pasture, which I had posted about this in the Facebook group And I know there was at least one person who had watched it, and they were like, "How did you get Chainsaw Massacre out of this?" So, so I can go into that a little bit here, but this is a movie of this woman who wakes up on this farm, and she can't really remember anything. Her memory's really fuzzy. She's there with her sister who is taking care of her, and her sister's husband is a doctor, and there's this little kid there, and her dad's there, and it's just like it's very just like fuzzy as to what is happening. We're just as confused as she is. And they're telling her that, hey, we're helping you get your memory back. And so what this film is doing is really tapping into anxiety in a lot of ways. But where it comes into like this whole being a puzzle piece here is that the way it's shot and the feeling of this movie and the just way it's done, everything from like the sound design of, being unique sounds and playing with sounds to have an effect on you as you watch it, the whole like cinema verte aspect of it seeming almost like documentary style at times.
Mhm.
And then there are also specific visuals like windmills, the fact that it's like out in the middle of nowhere, there's this isolation, there's the whole shutting of the door, which that whole Leatherface, when you first see him and then he slams the door shut. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
been done over and over and over, like Saw, for example. But in this case, it's just kind of, it's not even brought attention to. It's just like a little subtle thing that's there. And then also this woman, she escapes a couple of times. One time it is through a window, breaking of the window to get out of the house, and then you know uh, getting away. Another time she is basically comes across this guy that's on a tractor, who then
Mhm.
puts her on the tractor and helps her. She ends up, though, he's trying to take her back to the house so she gets away from him. That just seemed very much a lot like the finale of Chainsaw as well. So there's just a lot of things that, to me, it feels like that this is somebody who Texas Chainsaw Massacre is in their DNA, and they
Yeah.
went out to make a movie that kind of evoked that same kind of anxiety and that same sort of feeling, by again, doing it with as little as they actually had. And it's a brilliant, brilliant movie. I mean, I rewatched it and I was just like, yes, no, this is definitely one of my favorites from last year.
Yeah, I remember you talking really highly of it. I have not seen it, but I obviously this movie's influence is still happening all the time. I mean, last year we did Bloody Hell here on the podcast, and Texas Chainsaw was, of course, a puzzle piece on that one as well. And yeah, I mean, this is a movie that's going to continue, I think, inspiring things forever, pretty much.
And I bought Bloody Hell when you mentioned it was on sale here recently, but I hadn't watched it yet. So
Okay, right on. Well, I'll go to my next piece, which is basically just Rob Zombie's entire filmography.
yes.
Yeah, just absolutely any and everything he's done, from his originals to even things like Halloween, but just really, though, specifically that main trilogy of his, but really everything of his. Everything seems to be steeped in the idea of these like crazy Americans, and just how insane families can be, and just the gore and the people being trapped and capturing that insanity, and not always to as the success of this original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I don't really like Rob Zombie's movies quite that much, but you can absolutely see the influence of everything that the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre had on his movies. I would say maybe his movies are just as inspired by all of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, including some of the lesser sequels over the years, but really it's just everything that specific kind of version of this genre has brought to cinema.
Definitely. No, Rob Zombie, obviously greatly influenced by Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Before I go into my next piece, I wanted to mention that there's another filmmaker that I feel the same way, which my next piece will involve him.
Mhm.
But what I wanted to say also is that I think Rob Zombie also very much influenced by what influenced Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Mhm.
So if you don't mind, I could just throw out a couple of things because I mentioned Scooby Doo, I mentioned Psycho, but I also feel because if you look at the country at the time that this movie came out, you had the Manson family that had just happened a few years prior. You had
Sure.
Vietnam that
Yeah.
had was just by 74 was kind of ending after so long. You've got also at the time, I mean, malls and big business kind of starting to be what is taking over, devouring the smaller mom and pop shops. That was the
Yeah,
beginning of
yeah.
like all of that type stuff that we're still dealing with.
Oh, yeah.
Um, Movie wise, though, you had well, go if you go back to the my oldest piece here, the Old Dark House, which is a '30s movie about these people that go to this creepy house and there's this weird family there. And then from there you have Spider Baby in the '60s, which is a classic. That is again, it's like these weird people that live in this weird house, and it's more like suggestive as to are these people cannibals and things like that. And it doesn't get into, I mean, there's murder, but it doesn't get into anything too over the top. The other
Mhm.
thing with these other movies that I've just mentioned, they're more like kooky and
Sure.
like silly, which at the time you had the Monsters, which was 64, and you had the Addams Family on is 64, which is TV, which is again these weird families, the
Yeah.
kooky factor, the different factor. And then movie wise, you had like Night of the Living Dead in 68. And then you had Deliverance in 72.
Mm.
Of course, Last House on the Left in 72. And I think all of those things, though, were big influences on Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And then I think also, like, that's all like Rob Zombie in a blender, that
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and Chainsaw. So,
Definitely. Yeah. No, 100%. And I love that we just got a little mini missing pieces on Texas Chainsaw here.
well,
So,
and then then the other thing is, serial killers was also, and
right.
again,
That's
that's
a huge
another,
one.
that
Yeah.
was like a new thing at the time. They hadn't even coined that term serial killer at that time, but
Right.
Ed Gein was the biggest one that Tobe Hooper and Kim Hinkle have come out and said was definitely an influence, which that was also an influence on Hitchcock with Psycho.
Sure.
And then also the Candyman of Houston, which was another influence on this one because with that one you had uh, a separate person who was kind of leading the people to the other person who was the killer. So it was bigger than just the one person doing it, which really came into play with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but yeah, no, the filmmaker I was thinking of was Eli Roth. Specifically, I mean, one of the big pieces that I had down here, which you can bring in any of his films, but Hostel.
Yeah. I would say that would be the biggest for sure.
Yeah, why Hostel though? One, because you've got the aspect of basically entitled Americans who are just kind of feel like that they can just do anything they want to, go wherever they want to, and there's no consequences.
Right.
They live in their bubble of life where they never have to deal with crime. They don't have to deal with violence against them. And so wherever they go, their bubble's going to follow them and they'll be okay. And of course, Chainsaw Massacre is a big wake up to them of no, there's some bad people out there. you know,
Hmm.
a very cautionary tale. And so Hostel, it's the same thing. And not only that, like I said, this is very much a precursor to torture porn in many ways.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
It shows it in the emotional sense of it more so than the physical, whereas Hostel, was the one that really, amped things up with the physical torture. Not only that, there's a visual cue with Eli Roth in Cabin Fever when that the house reveal. He completely, of course, many people, that's another one of those visuals that has been ripped off from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But in Cabin Fever, the part where the girl, and I think she's even wearing red shorts, and it starts up from like her feet and then up to her butt, and there's the reveal of the house.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no, Eli Roth is right along there. I mean, even you can go to Green Inferno, which was his cannibal movie. So
Yeah,
just like Rob
absolutely.
Zombie.
No, definitely. The two of them are both, I think, kind of go hand in hand with that, and definitely agree. And I'll go to another piece. I'm going to combine two movies here because I think they both kind of draw inspiration from the same idea here.
Hmm.
So that's going to be 1975, the next year, Jaws,
Hmm.
and 1979, Alien.
Mm.
Um, Both movies where you're basically in this kind of remote place that's not very easy to get out of, in Jaws in the ocean, and Alien in space, and where there is this just unstoppable killing force that there's just very little hope of getting away from. And both are kind of in their way very unique, different slasher kind of movies, but they both kind of follow that same blueprint of something coming to get you, and there's probably no chance of escaping it.
Right. Well, and Jaws also is like, so that's, I mean, that's the thing. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you don't really see a whole lot. It's
Yeah.
more of what you don't see, and what that it's you in your imagination. And I think Jaws, um most of that movie, you're in that same realm of being scared, not because of what is shown, but what isn't shown,
Yeah,
which
for sure.
goes back definitely to Hitchcock with
Yep.
Psycho, and the way that the deaths were shot in that film, and the way Hitchcock worked overall. And I think definitely part of what makes Jaws so great, is that for the longest time you don't see that shark, because then once you see that shark, it's kind of fake.
A little bit.
But yeah, no, and then with Alien, again, it's a very like female empowering film, especially, I mean,
Sure.
especially at the time. I mean, you think about when that came out, and the survivor is a woman, and then you've got that with Alien, just kind of takes it to another level of creating that person into, you know, eventually through the series, she's basically a superhero.
Yeah, basically.
So I mean, yeah, definitely, those are both good in ways you mentioned, and then also, like I was saying, with a little bit of a different here. But yeah, that whole aspect of you're being trapped somewhere, you're going to die, and there's not much you can do about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. So what do you have for your next one?
Well, I want to go with and I'll just combine two here. The whole cannibal family aspect. I think that even though the cannibalism was kind of played down in this film, because I mean, if you think at the time, there was probably something that was so very uh, taboo and not in any films, or if it was very much implied, or it was done, like I was saying before, in like a kooky
Yeah,
family
yeah.
kind of way. But I would say, The Hills Have Eyes, which was 77. Wes
Mhm.
Craven, I think in many ways, Wes Craven influenced Chainsaw Massacre, and then I think he was influenced by it with what
Yeah,
he
yeah.
did in The Hills Have Eyes, and then I'll go a second piece to that, A Wrong Turn,
Sure.
which was of course greatly influenced by Hills Have Eyes. It's one of those things that you take underground and you take extreme films and you start to work with some sort of theme, and once it gets there it'll slowly seep into like the mainstream, or in this case it was the mainstream horror, and then from there it goes more into mainstream in general. And I think that the fact that you had this movie that was so successful with these themes of cannibalism, like again, I very much feel it you know led to not only Hills Have Eyes, but also Cannibal Holocaust, so many other just cannibal movies. But not only that, but the Oscar winning Silence of the Lambs, which
Yeah, yeah.
also was inspired by Ed Gein. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it just shows you like how these things can kind of start and then where they can kind of go.
Yeah. And also I would say like combining those two, The Hills Have Eyes and Wrong Turn, tying it back to your first piece there, the Blair Witch Project, and then with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre itself, all of these movies, they really seeped into everybody's imagination
Right.
in a way that when you do make a wrong turn out in the middle of nowhere, particularly maybe somewhere in Texas or something, you think that, you're fucked. Like you are
Right.
going to get eaten by some
Right.
weird hill people at any moment. And
Right.
it's just the fact that they were able to paint a picture that just feels so vivid and so real with these movies that it would even like enter your mind as that's a thing that could happen is pretty amazing and crazy and scary.
Oh yeah, and I mean that's the thing is that definitely because I was born in Texas and grew up in Texas, and even as somebody that knows Texas, there's plenty of places when you're traveling. You're
You don't
like,
want to make a wrong turn.
where am I and what am I going to run into? Now
Yeah.
I'm in Ohio, right by Kentucky and West Virginia. And West Virginia, of course, is where the Wrong Turn movies were based. And yeah, there's
Awesome.
definitely that whole aspect of, okay, where am I at right now? What is this? So yeah, that's a good way to put it. Is that how it's just kind of seeped into the collective imagination
Yeah,
of maybe that wasn't real, but aspects of it were real, and that these things can happen.
they can
So
happen.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll go to my last piece for things that were inspired by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's not a movie, but it is every haunted house in America at Halloween time,
Yes. Yes.
because there's always a big guy with a chainsaw that runs after you. It's like it's the main thing. It's what you go for
Right.
every Halloween, and I have to assume that didn't exist pre Texas Chainsaw. Like that's Leatherface. Like
Right.
it's got to be that it came from him and a little Ed Gein, I guess. But being a big guy. But yeah, it's such a big part of like kind of the American experience is those haunted houses every Halloween, and always so much fun. And there's always the guy with the chainsaw, and he's always the mainstay. He's the thing you go for.
Right.
He's the star of the show.
Yeah, there's always the the clown or the clowns, and
Mm-hmm.
then at the end, that's the chainsaw guy. Yeah, and what's funny is that the way things work. I, of course, went to a haunted house and got scared by a chainsaw guy before I'd even seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Uh, again, growing up, movies were not as available as they are now. Anybody
Right.
listening can just go pull it up on their computer and watch the Chainsaw Massacre, but I had to actually rent it, uh, and I wasn't gonna get it rented by my dad or my mom.
Right. Right.
So So, I actually experienced one of these haunted houses before even experiencing the film, and yes, the chainsaw guy scared the crap out of me.
Oh, I bet.
But that was not something that existed. But now, a guy in a mask with a chainsaw, that's just basically, if it has something to do with people and being scared, that's an element that could pop up in, like, low budget horror movies all the time. It happens. So
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So you got one more that you want to mention before we move on to the new Texas Chainsaw?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go with this one. Here's a fun one, because one of the ways that you can watch this movie and interpret this film is basically as a home invasion. I'm going to say Home Alone.
All right.
Was inspired by Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because if you think about it, Leatherface is basically Kevin, or Kevin's Leatherface. So here he is. He's in his home. He is by himself. He is minding his own business. All of a sudden, this dude just comes up in his house. What's his first instinct to do? Hit him in the head with a hammer. That's what Leatherface does. But of course, Kevin does the same thing to an extent, with his marbles and Hot Wheels cars, and heating up the doorknob, and it's protecting himself and protecting his castle, and that's all that Leatherface is doing. Leatherface didn't come out of his house and hit this guy in the head. This guy was in his house, deep in his house.
Absolutely. And by the way, that's a very important aspect of the story, is that, we've kind of mentioned it a couple of times here, but the fact that these people are basically intruding,
Right.
And so, he's a mass murdering psychopath, but at the same time, stay out of people's houses.
Exactly. Exactly. If they don't answer the door, maybe they don't want to come to the door. I mean, but again, this goes back to that whole, like, these self-entitled kids that just, they can do whatever they want. I mean, they can go up in somebody's house. And that's the thing, though, also, that hits this all home, that basically Leatherface and Kevin are very much the same, is that after he takes care of the first person, and then the second girl comes in, and he puts her on the hook. Leatherface has a freak out. He doesn't know what is going on. He's like, are we being invaded? Like, he's looking out the window. He's just like so paranoid. Am I going to get in trouble for what's just happened? I mean, he's like more stressed out than Kevin is in Home Alone. I mean, and he's the one that we're like so scared of, and he's traumatized in this situation. So, I mean, stay out of people's houses. I mean,
I think that's a good lesson to leave that on. So let's talk about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the new one out now on Netflix.
Yes.
A movie that I know the critical community absolutely hates. Really, really thought it was terrible, but audiences are a little more split on it. I know we've talked about it beforehand. We both kind of liked it. Didn't love it, but liked it enough. It's definitely a messy movie. I would definitely stop short of calling it a good movie. But I also, I enjoyed it. It's what you would want from a late era Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. I think the main thing that I took away from this is we're probably never going to get a movie, especially within the series, but really a movie that captures what the original captured. So instead, let's just get this crazy guy with a chainsaw and give you some gore. And that's what this movie is, I think.
Yeah. It's just it's not a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. That's my whole argument against it. I mean, it very much is, a guy with a chainsaw. No need for it to have been called Texas Chainsaw Massacre in any way.
Right. And I think I'm going to actually go with the first piece here, because it's the most obvious piece, and we might as well just kick it off with this. And that is the 2018 Halloween reboot, which, I mean, he is almost indistinguishable from Michael Myers at this point. In
In
the
this
way that,
film, yes.
yeah, in this particular film, they're just these just evil, unstoppable killing
Hmm.
machines that all of the story that is put around them is useless. It's completely you're there to see them kill people, and that's that. I would say that this also kind of almost in a way operates as a parody of the 2018 Halloween. All of the self-importance and self-mythologizing and bringing back the classic character for no good reason, just to help the new characters, and it does so much of the exact same things that Halloween did. I wouldn't say worse or better. I would say almost on the same footing. As you know, I did not like the new Halloween, and I don't
Right.
like its sequel, Halloween Kills. I would say it's pretty much on the same level.
Well, and might as well extend that piece to say Halloween and Halloween Kills, because
Yeah, together. Absolutely.
yeah, no, yeah. The thing is, I thought Halloween Kills was brilliant. I thought it is
You
hilarious.
liked it. Yeah.
Um,
I wish I liked it because I feel like they were going for very, very stupid and silly and fun, and I just didn't get it from it.
yeah. Well, this one, I wish it was more like Halloween Kills. But I mean, like I said, I mean, they might as well just call this like Charlie the Chainsaw Guy or
Yeah.
something like that. The fact that they try to tie it in with the opening to the original, and then the fact that they bring Sally back, which to me is just completely stupid to do anyway.
Hmm.
It just does not work, especially the fact that he's supposed to be an orphan. At what point was he an orphan? When he in his 30s? I mean,
I'm so glad you just said that because while I was watching this movie, one of the main things, and again, like, we're not here to like review the movie. We're here to talk about
right.
inspirations. But seriously, watching this, I'm like, how many scenes did they cut out that like are connective tissue? Like, what is happening at any given point in the beginning of this movie?
Right, right. Well, that was what Melanie said whenever it was over. She was like, "I don't even know what happened."
Right.
She's
We
like,
we cut we
"Where
cut
did
out
he come from?"
every sequel to the movies. They're all cut out of the continuum of this, and yet this is not where we left off at the end of the first one. Like,
Well,
what
this
is
is a
happening?
direct sequel to the first one, so obviously here you've got him. I mean, as much as you can figure, he was at least in his 20s when the first one ended, because the hitchhiker and him worked at the slaughterhouse and were
Mm,
basically let go because of this new technology. And that's part of the important things of the story, is that it's a revenge film about, you know, the old versus the new, and that anger and that hostility of not letting go of the old and kind of moving on. So I
yeah,
mean, that was who he was a, you know, somebody that slaughtered. And so here he is just continuing on with what he did prior. So,
sure.
which to that, with the point I just made, I'll go ahead and throw in my first piece.
All right.
Well, see, I got more of anti pieces than real pieces for this new movie, because it's more of like where they should have went.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
Where they should have went. And this is yeah, that's fine. I'll go with the first one here. It's Assault on Wall Street. Uwe Boll movie. I think I'm the only person brings up Uwe Boll, maybe Ryan.
I
um
Yeah, very rare, but yeah.
so Assault on Wall Street is a movie, just basically about a guy who just completely feels totally left alone, abandoned, and forgotten about. He was a military guy. He was a soldier. He was married. He had a family. He was gonna well, he was about to, him and his wife were gonna have a kid. Well, his wife, gets sick, and then they don't have the means to take care of her. She ends up dying. He loses all of his money. He ends up losing his job because he does security for banks, and they can't have somebody who's now in debt and having his wages garnished, working for them. So he has his house repossessed. He's basically everything's stripped away, and he is
Yeah.
just angry
I
and wants
remember
to take it
this.
out on all the banks, Wall Street. And so basically he that's what he reverts back to what he was, which is a soldier, a killer, and then he uses that as revenge against Wall Street. And
Yeah.
so to me, that's what the Leatherface on his own without the family, that's the movie that they could have made. And to a degree, they kind of sort of throw in some things to kind of do that, because obviously it's very much a old versus new
Mhm.
in the film, but it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
kind of like something that's just tossed in there. It's not like
Right.
what the movie is about. And
Well,
I
there's a
think
lot of things just tossed in there. Yeah,
yes,
there's economy, there's violence in the cities, there's gun violence,
yes,
there's so many
yes,
little ideas thrown in, none of which are
right,
you know.
yeah,
And I actually saw an interview with Fede Alvarez, who co-wrote the script, or at least came up with the story, where he kind of said that coming to this country as an immigrant, like he noticed that you just see little bits and pieces of all these stories, and none of them are ever resolved in any way. Because I mean, that's America for you, you know, and that kind of makes sense in a way, although it's also kind of a cop out, I
you're right.
think, you know. But it does make sense though that you see these stories every day, and nothing is ever, it never goes anywhere, but you at least see them all the time in the news.
Yeah. Well,
So
like I said, I think there were a lot of things that could have been grasped onto and really uh, zoned in on and made that the story. And like I said, Assault on Wall Street could have been one of those things. And I know what you're thinking. Should Uwe Boll have made this Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Um,
that's what we're all
yeah,
thinking
yeah, yeah,
right
yeah,
now.
yeah. Well, well, not only that.
The only way this movie could have been worse.
And I also know the downside of that is that people are probably like, well, are you saying we should have had Joker or Cruella, Texas Chainsaw Massacre with Leatherface? In a way, I am saying that.
We're getting a real look inside the mind of a psycho right now. Is what's happening. Um, yeah, I'm going to move on to my next piece. And actually, I might as well go to this one. You brought it up a bunch of times during the talk about the original, but I'm going to go with Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, because here we've got Leatherface wearing his mother's face, and obviously with Norman Bates dressing up as his
Right.
mother. I think Leatherface finally completes that here, where he finally gets to be completely inspired by Norman Bates and Psycho. So
Right,
it
right.
all comes back around all these years later.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing. Is this his mother? I mean, who is this woman? I mean,
Story wise, don't even try. Don't even try to follow it
because
story
because
wise.
in the original, there's grandma who's dead in the attic, but there's never any motherly figure. In fact, Leatherface kind of takes on the role of the woman of the house. So I mean,
Hmm.
who is this woman?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of important whenever you're following up a movie 48 years later, to like kind of give us a little bit more details like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I just wanted that. I mean,
Yeah. It's a messy movie for sure. But let's go on to your next piece. What do you got next?
so I've got actually a documentary. It's called Welcome to Leith. It's actually just a movie that was on Tubi that I stumbled across and watched. I knew nothing about it. It's evidently set during 2012, and what it is it's this small little town where this white supremacist decides, hey, land is really cheap there. I'm going to go in and buy a bunch of land, and I'm going to start like a little, you know, cult.
Oh,
And we're going
okay.
to take over this town, and then we're going to be the majority, and we're going to own this town and do whatever we want with this town. And
Mm.
so he starts buying off all this land, and then he moves in a family of white supremacists, and then he starts donating the land that he's bought to other like well-known white supremacists. And so it's this whole thing with trying to take over this town, where this is a town that does not want anything to do with this guy or any of his beliefs, even though it's a town that's it's mostly made of white people. There's like one black guy that lives in the whole town.
Mhm.
And it's this town versus these people and what they're trying to do. And some of that kind of came up here, which again is one of those things that they didn't really explore as well as they could have, but I think could
Sure.
have made it more interesting, because you've got the hipsters basically have come in and it bought up all this land as his ghost town in Texas, and trying to flip the properties to hipsters so that this is going to be the new downtown Las Vegas.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and of course you got Leatherface just kind of in the middle, and it's not the town versus these people, but it's Leatherface versus these people. It's a very, very interesting documentary, though. I very
It
much
sounds
recommend
great.
it. And that little piece, though, is just kind of a one of those thrown in ideas in this new chainsaw.
Yeah. Yeah, one of many just thrown in ideas, and yeah, that sounds like a great documentary. I'm gonna have to check that out. And that also, yeah, to the hipsters like kind of moving into town and taking it over for their businesses and everything like that. That's like a, because I couldn't think of any movies like that. I did read. I've never actually seen it, but I read that Halloween Resurrection has a kind of slightly similar with like a reality show aspect, like coming into the house for a reality show, not necessarily a full town, but
Yeah, I slightly remember that movie. I remember it was awful.
yeah,
This one is very much kind of like that, because I think that's the one that Jamie Lee Curtis is in for like 5 minutes, and
right,
they actually
right,
kill her.
yeah,
And so, like, it's funny because, yeah, I guess that would be a good comparison. That movie.
yeah. I was gonna say I'll have to watch it one of these days, but no, I
It's
don't.
awful.
I
It's like who is it? There's a rapper in it. I'm trying to
LL
remember.
Cool J, right?
No, he's in one of the good ones. I think
Oh, okay.
it's like
Then Buster Rhymes, because
yeah,
he's
yeah,
in one
yeah,
of
yeah.
them.
That's who it
Is
is.
it
Yeah,
Buster Rhymes?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's real bad. It really was during the heyday of like reality TV, and they really tried to capitalize on that. And it's just
The heyday of reality TV is the rest of recorded human history
well, the
from now forward.
early boom, I'd guess.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Well, I'll go to my next piece, and I told you I was going to do this. I have to, but this movie absolutely is centered on a bus party that comes to this town with all of these young people ready to invest in the town. And while it's slightly different, there is a little movie by Las Vegas filmmakers, the Mahal brothers, and their collaborator Rolf Konevsky, called Bus Party to Hell, that I did a bunch of music for. We actually covered here on the podcast in like the first 10
Hmm.
episodes, I think. It's from 2017. And it features a bunch of young people on a bus party that goes horribly wrong, and lots of gore takes place on and around the bus. And so, yeah, I don't know if this filmmaker saw Bus Party to Hell, but it definitely, they're the only two movies I could think of that feature a bus party and a
Right.
shitload of gore. And I will say that the bus scene will come up in another one of my puzzle pieces coming up, but is the centerpiece of the film and is really a lot of fun, I thought.
Yeah, yeah, no, I definitely thought of that movie too. And I mean, I will say that this movie is, it's been a while since I saw Bus Party to Hell, but I mean, they're kind of equal films. So I mean, if somebody liked this new Chainsaw Massacre, they definitely should check out Bus Party to Hell. It's
I would
definitely a fun
agree.
movie. Again,
Absolutely.
it's fun. You don't have that whole like expectation involved into it going in either, so you're able to just have fun with it. Whereas with
Yes.
this one, I was not on first viewing able to do that. I think over time, because I find myself with that all the time with the Chainsaw films, initial watching of them is fairly negative. And then I go back and I rewatch it. And I'm like, hey, this is kind of fun. I mean, even the bad ones I like. So yeah, no, Bus Party to Hell is definitely a fun time. The bus scene instantly brought that back to mind.
Hmm.
Which the massacre on the bus here is definitely the highlight of the new Chainsaw film. That is definitely accurate. It's so ridiculous. And it kind of does both worlds of you actually see some of the things, and then there are times when it's just like you're just seeing like the blood kind of splattering from the outside of the bus through the windows, which is really
Yeah,
cool
yeah.
effect. um the things that reminded me of was one, again, people in this closed, well, I guess it was a bus and a chainsaw, and that's Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, which
Sure.
the old boomer accidentally saws the young lady in half, which was actually one of those I know total James Gunn moment that I actually thought was hilarious though at the time. Um,
He's not all bad, Chad. He's not all bad.
And then the other thing that came to mind for me, and I may have talked about it on the Bus Party to Hell, was Judgment Night, which Judgment Night, a group of guys in an RV, and which is kind of be a good one for the first Chainsaw and for this one as well. In an RV, and they get stuck in the wrong part of town. They see a murder, and then of course they end up getting tracked down by the killer. But the beginning half of that film is all in the RV.
Yeah.
So I think it works for both of the films we're talking about.
Awesome. Yeah. And you know what? I might as well just jump right in there along with those two because two other pieces that involve bus action scenes that I was going to include, and these might be too new to actually have been an influence on this. I'm not sure when exactly this was shot. I know it went through a long production, hell
Yes.
situation, but last year's Shang-Chi and Nobody. So right now in the public consciousness, there's a lot of bus fights happening. It seems to be a thing lately. I don't know why, but those were two of the best action moments of last year, I think. And we're right back to action on buses this year. So maybe we'll continue to get more action on buses. But yeah, they all
I
kind of go together.
I hadn't seen Nobody, but yeah, no, definitely a great scene. In the other film, it seems like there was a fight on a bus in Captain Marvel as well.
Might have been.
Yeah,
Might have been. Yeah, it's happening a lot lately.
yeah. What I was gonna say is Final Destination. This is another
Sure.
one of those things that kind of just like is a part, one of those thrown out there pieces of this new film. And the girl, survivor of a school shooting,
Hmm.
and she even makes the mention of, hey, this is because of me. Death is following me.
Yeah.
I think that that whole angle of the school shooting and her with her PTSD and her overcoming that, to me, is the strongest thing in this film. And just like I said, just one of many things just kind of thrown out there.
Yeah.
It just has that small little Final Destination tie to it, which they can, in a sequel, continue on. If this wasn't a chainsaw movie, they could have just continued on with her trying to escape death and other obstacles coming her way. But with this, of course, Leatherface will be back for her.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And it's funny. That is one of those many ideas that they just kind of throw in there, but don't explore whatsoever. But I had Final Destination on my list as well because, yeah, it's totally like that's what they're going for with that. I'll go with one last piece here from me. And I started the whole conversation talking about the Evil Dead. I'm going to go with the 2013 Fede Alvarez Evil Dead as a puzzle piece here, which, of course, he co-wrote this. But in a similar way, in that reboot, which was actually very surprisingly good, I thought. But one thing that does that this does as well is just laser focus in on the brutality as the number one thing. Let's make a movie that takes those particular situations of their original counterparts and focus in on just how brutal and violent and gory they are. And that's the movie we want to make. Forget about any of the other nuance, any of the other story elements, any of what it all means. Just let's take the gore and make a movie out of it. And that's, I think that's Fede Alvarez is like, that's what he loves. And that's cool with me. I mean, I like an over the top gory movie. That's fine. It would just be nice if maybe the story kind of came together in some slightly better way.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I'm totally cool with that as well. Because that's the thing is these reboots, sequels, requels, prequels, whatever you want to call any of them. What they do is they get people talking about the original film anyway. They get people talking about the legacy of the original, and to me, that's a positive, regardless of what they didn't do or what they should have done. A lot of people get really, really worked up and angry about that. This film, there's some people that are just like really, really off the deep end, angry, and just like
which is crazy. Have they seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 lately? I mean, it's fucking insane.
Have they seen The Next Generation?
Oh God.
Yeah. And it's just like the Chainsaw Massacre movies. This is this was the 9th one, right?
I think so, 9.
Yeah. None of them ever connected in any way. Part 2 didn't really connect. I mean, they're all just kind of their own individual thing. And some are really good at what they try to do. Some are not as good. But to me, I just try to enjoy what they are and have fun with it. And there's definitely some fun to be had with this one. It's what it is. So I don't get worked up about it, but be happy people are still talking about the original, 1974. And here we are doing a podcast talking about it. I mean, that says a lot.
Absolutely. Well, that sounded like closing thoughts there. Do you want to throw out one more piece? Or because I know you probably have like 100 more listed.
Well, I mean, I could just touch on real quick. One of the things that this will go back to the original. One of the things that I really latched on, that I really enjoyed about the original, that and I can compare this with the new one and how the new one doesn't do anything whatsoever. And that's that whole abuse, neglect angle. Again, going back to Leatherface and that moment when he first kills and the freak out that he has. And then also once his brothers come, the way that they treat him, you can just tell that this is a guy that he's not all there. He's very much grown up, being abused. He's the mother of the house where he does the cleaning and the cooking.
Yeah.
Therefore, that's why the house is so nice. Just the whole abuse, neglect angle, creating a monster type thing. I thought of Carrie, which is, that's the other thing, is that this is a very artistic horror film. Same thing with Carrie. More recent with that, I would say the movie Martyrs. And what I wanted to say, this will be final thought though with Leatherface, is that look at the original Leatherface and how verbal he is. Look at the original Leatherface, how much of a just bumbling idiot, honestly. He's not all there. He's not all there physically, mentally, emotionally. He runs like a cartoon. He really does.
Yeah.
And then jump to 48 years later, he seems to have all his mental capacity. He's all there.
Sure.
He can like play hide and seek with her and hide the chainsaw and then do like these tricks with the chainsaw, throwing it across the floor. And he gets around a lot better than he did 48 years ago. I mean, here he is. He hasn't picked up the chainsaw in who knows how long. And here he is. He's in his 70s or 80s, and he's like champion chainsaw wielder. I mean,
I hope I'm in that good shape when I'm in my
exactly.
80s.
Yeah, I hadn't picked up a chainsaw in at least 30 years. If I was to do it, I mean, I would just be like, okay, how do I start it?
Chad with a chainsaw. Now that's a scary thought.
So no, again, I understand though some of the reason why people hate this movie, and I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
So I just had to get that out there though, because again, the first one just has so many ways that you can view it and read into it, and it's just so much that you can connect with. And this new one is just so much of just throwing surface things, onto the wall and trying to find something that sticks. And all it
Yeah.
wants to do though is just, have gore,
Yeah.
which it does well.
Yeah, exactly. That's really all it cares about, and it does it pretty well. So I think it's not all that bad, but it's also not that good. So I think I think that's the place to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Chad, is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Yes, actually, and this is one I did post about a little while back. You might remember a video of a girl making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that I posted in the Facebook group. So this is a movie called Kid Thing. It takes place outskirts of Austin, and it's this girl who doesn't have any like parental guidance at all. She has this, very weird family. Her parental figures are these two guys that are almost like, Beavis and Butthead, and you're not even sure what the relationship is because she doesn't call either one dad or anything. She calls them by their first name, and they're into like car derbies and scratching lottery tickets, and they're always fighting. And this is, what she has to look up to. But it's kind of like a female Gumo because she's just kind of going around doing her own thing, whatever she wants to, whether it's, stealing from the local convenience store or shooting stuff with a paint gun. And it's just her kind of off on her own, getting into little things. And there's that classic peanut butter and jelly moment because she's making these sandwiches for this lady who is in a hole in the woods. So yeah, Kid Thing. It's a 2012 movie. The Zellner brothers made that. It is fantastic, so definitely recommend it.
Right on. I'm gonna go have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich now. So.
Only if you make it properly.
Yes,
Grab the
absolutely.
peanut butter with your hand.
Oh, they made Damsel, huh? I've been trying to watch Damsel for a while now. I've never seen it.
Yeah, evidently they've got a big following, but
yeah,
no, that one's
awesome.
great.
Awesome. Well, Chad, thank you as always for being here, and I'm sure you'll be back soon enough. There's a bunch of DC movies coming this year, so we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. Last year with the movies we've gotten, and then this year, lots of good stuff on the way. So I am here when you need me.
Check out the Sonic Cinema podcast, where film critic Brian Scuttle takes you through the year discussing classic films, reviewing modern hits and misses, covering film festivals, and interviewing filmmakers and film critics. Click subscribe at YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google, and other platforms, or follow along at www.sonic-cinema.com.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you to Chad for joining me on that one. And I hope you are enjoying what we do here on Piecing It Together. If you are, I would really appreciate it if you would go drop a little 5-star rating and maybe even a review if you've got a couple of minutes on Apple Podcasts, over on Spotify, Good Pods, Podchaser, wherever you can leave a review. that would be so wonderful if you did that. We really appreciate it. And also just make sure you're subscribed. Follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces. And don't forget about the Patreon I told you about at the top of the show. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen, in case you forgot the link and over the course of the last hour you decided that you wanted to sign up. That's the link. Go do it. But most of all, just share the show. We really appreciate that because then it gets the show out in front of new listeners, new potential guests for upcoming episodes, all kinds of great stuff like that. So thank you so much for listening and consider sharing the show. So I always close these episodes out with a piece of my music. And usually I try to keep a little track of what I've been playing so I don't repeat the same song. I mean, I have a lot of music, but there's only a couple of hundred tracks for me to pick from, but which sounds like a lot, but it is a lot. But I try to like mix them up, and that way I don't play the same song multiple times. In any kind of in a year or at least in a few months. But this is a unique situation because last week we did the episode on Peacemaker. And it's such like a silly, goofy, over the top 80s themed kind of an intro to that show, Peacemaker, that it felt right for the closing to play this track called Party Bus to Hell from a film that I did music for called Bus Party to Hell, which was actually a puzzle piece here on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre episode. And it's actually a film produced by local filmmakers Sonny and Michael Mahal, directed by Rolf Konevsky. A really crazy, over-the-top, ridiculous gore fest with lots of blood and boobs and set on a party bus with all kinds of killing and violence and creatures and demons and Tara Reid's in it as well. And it's a lot of fun. And you should go check the movie out. Listen to the episode we did on it way back in the first year of piecing it together. I also interviewed the film's director. A lot of fun stuff there. I played it last week, not realizing that this week I would be doing the Texas Chainsaw Massacre episode, and that Bus Party to Hell would be such a perfect puzzle piece. But that's how things happen sometimes. So I have to play it again because who knows when the next time I'll get to play this song, when it will like be a good fit for the particular movie we're currently talking about. So it's just too perfect. I got to play it again. So next week I'll play a preview of some new music for my next album. That'd be a good way to say I'm sorry for playing Party Bus to Hell 2 weeks in a row. So this is Party Bus to Hell from the film Bus Party to Hell. Hope you enjoy it. We'll be back with more piecing it together real soon.
We're on a party bus. an All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.